You might feel good, you might feel bad, you might feel a little bit of both. I think that's where I'm at, feeling a little bit of both. Welcome in on a rain-soaked Wednesday in Michigan to the Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football and basketball. The season is done for Michigan. The college basketball season is not complete yet. Still have the Final Four to go through, but there are a lot of things happening with the rosters across the country and a roster right here in the state of Michigan with the University of Michigan, with guys taking off and guys coming in. So that's where the excitement comes in, and possibly the depression. And we will look at the portal and what's been going on there. If the portal, if you just touch it right now, woo, it's hot. You got to keep your the portal. You put your hands up there. That thing is warm and might even be. Woo, it is too hot to touch. But we'll go over it and see where we're at. We're never too far away from talking about football. Give you my thoughts on football and what I'm thinking about specifically with the quarterback position. But we are going to start with the emotion of players taking off and hitting the portal that you liked and that were good at Michigan. Some others, you maybe not have cared about. And then some others that are coming in and you're saying, hey, is this guy any good? And then you're thinking, yeah, I think maybe so. And, that's where it starts. There's a lot of people, what's going on? College basketball, this is terrible. This is we've always talked about when it was going to be, the end of the line. And I get that part where last year you wanted a completely new roster and you got it. And then this year, Michigan had a nice season. You're like, okay, there's something to build on. And then players were still taking off. You're like, this isn't the college basketball that I grew up with. And that part is true. So there's going to be a tinge, I think, of disappointment. And it's understandable if you're somebody that yearns for yesteryear when it comes to the college game. And if you're really going back to yesteryear, you got to really go back to where you really think about team building and, guys who are going to stay 3-4 years. It's been a long time. That ship has sailed a long time ago. It felt to me 20 years ago, whatever it was, where, Kevin Garnett was going pro after, the Fab Five. So in this 21st century, it has been like this, where college basketball, if you're not paying attention all the time, you go into the season, you're like, who are these guys? I don't know who any of these players are. And for your average fan, they don't really watch until, maybe let's take Michigan, for example. Your average fan, they'll play a big game, maybe they're ranked or something. They'll play a big game in the Big Ten. They'll play against Ohio State. You'll watch that. Of course, everyone will watch when they're playing Michigan State, and then everybody watches in the tournament. But for the most part, your average fan are like, who are these guys? I don't know who any of these players are. And now it's even more where you're going to have to, follow along, and you're going to have a roster in front of you. It's a new era is what it's coming down to here. It reminds me a little bit of my fantasy football league that I've been in for 30 years. We get to keep 2 players, and then you go into the draft, and then, you're drafting the rest of the team. And some years, like this year, I had a great team. I don't want to lose any of my players. I'd like to keep, the entire team, but I can only keep 2. Where the year before, I was like in last place. I didn't even have 2 good guys that I could keep. I was like, man, I can't wait for the draft. And it makes me feel like that with college basketball right now. The season just ended, and now it is a new season that has begun. This is a new team. And if you like some players that were on the team last year, we've always had to deal with, we'll take Danny Wolf as an example. Everyone out there would love to see the Wolf of State Street come back. Oh, Danny Wolf, he exceeded expectations. I don't even know if Dusty May was thinking that he was going to be the player that he was for Michigan, but he's likely going to go into the NBA draft. And then you get to be where you're like, I don't think he's really a first rounder. And then you're like, maybe he is. Maybe that's just the way it is. And then you've got to let him go. And you understand it. And even though you want him back, you'll say something like, he's not a first rounder. Although, boy, he could be if he came back to Michigan. And now you have players and they have their agents. And if you just think it through, if you're an agent, you immediately are calling Michigan as soon as you can, even before the season starts, and you know what number you got to come into Michigan. But then if your player has a good week or even a good game, you're like, what's going to be the number next year? And I don't know if they're hanging up on him saying, well, we don't discuss what your NIL number is going to be throughout the season. I don't know if they could approach it that way, because if they did, and we'll take Trey Donaldson as an example, who logged over 30 minutes, was Michigan's starting point guard. If Donaldson's agent was calling up Michigan and saying, what's the number going to be next year? Michigan's like, we're not just going to discuss that until next year. Or even if they did give him a number, let's just say it's 100,000. It could be 10 times that. Donaldson's agent is going to be out there talking to every school and saying, hey, you like Trey? What are you offering? And if the number's right, you're ready to go. And that's working with all the players. And it's free agency every day, certainly every week. And definitely we see it throughout the season. And that's just the name of the game now. If you can find more money somewhere else than where you're at, we'll take the Donaldson example again. Let's say Michigan said, yeah, we'll give you another $100,000 coming back. And there was just a team that was saying, we'll give you 150. Well, Donaldson, he's in a good situation, but he could be like, 50 grand's 50 grand. I don't know how much time it used to be. Players would consider things like school and education, but I don't hear anybody talking about education and, Michigan and getting a degree. That's like an afterthought. Sometimes like, oh yeah, hey, I hear Michigan's pretty good, scholastically or whatever else. No, it's about, and the money could be a lot more. Trey could be watching this and saying, 100,000, St. John's is offering me 950 and Michigan's offering me 500,000. You would be taken off too. So I get that part. So recruiting and money, playing time and money, you got the player, you got the agent, and then the school going back and forth all the time. And that question about, is this new way good for college basketball? No, it's not good. It's not ideal. The reason it's nice for the players, where they get to move around, do whatever else, and make as much money as they can. So it's great for them. And is it good for the school? I don't know. A place like Michigan's going to be okay if they are getting funded. We just saw Dusty May. He was able to go out and spin 6 transfers and 3 freshmen into a Sweet 16 team and a Big Ten tournament title. He's pretty good at this new way of college basketball. So that's a positive. And then Michigan, if they're back and have got the cash, they're going to be okay. They're going to be able to, if they have the coach, and they do, and the resources. And I don't know if they've got the, top 5, top 10. I think they have top 25. That would be my guess. Top 25 resources for college basketball. They're going to be okay. If it comes to your general fan of college basketball, I think there's going to be a lot of negativity. It's like, this isn't, I don't know who any of these guys are. And again, that's a tune that you could have been singing for the last 25 years. So I don't know. It's even accelerated now, but the same thing. If you're saying, I don't know who anyone is, where's the loyalty? It's about the people have been talking about that for 25 years. So I don't think NIL has ruined it. It's ruined the game. I thought for years the one and done ruined the game. Not that I cared if a guy left and went for money, but I think about, it was a couple of years ago, Michigan had Caleb Houston and Moussa Diabate. These guys were 5 stars and they came in, and Caleb Houston was a bust. I mean, he couldn't shoot. He had just a couple good games. Even though Michigan made the Sweet 16, he didn't score a point in the tournament. And, he was terrible. And yet, terrible if you were thinking he was going to be a 5-star. He had a sweet-looking stroke. But he was terrible when you thought about him being an impact player. And then he took off, and everybody's like, he's not going to make it in the NBA. Well, he wasn't a first-rounder, but he was right there in the second round, and he got guaranteed money. And he's still sitting around with, $5 million in his back pocket saying, hey, you thought I was terrible? How about this? And Diabate showed some flashes, but he wasn't very much of an impact player at Michigan. But, they're gone. And so each and every year, you've got to look at this and piece this thing together and how it's going to go. And so for your general college basketball fan, they're not going to like it. But people that are really into Michigan and people that are really into shows like Good Afternoon Michigan Football and Basketball, you know what? They are really into it. They like it because you know why? You tend to have people that watch shows like this that even though I'm almost 55, you're generally in your 20s and 30s where you're watching a show like this, maybe even younger. And people that like recruiting, and that goes across all ages, people like recruiting. It's kind of a niche thing. If you're somebody that follows recruiting, you can be into it. And then you'll talk with people that say they're Michigan fans and they're like, what are you talking about? When it comes down to the way that you follow recruiting, it's a small percentage, but if you like recruiting, you understand you can be in on somebody and it is the flavor of the day. And this player is hot and it is everything. The excitement of the chase, you're all about it. And if they go somewhere else, it's like, I'm on to the next one. And that's what the transfer portal is for college basketball. You could be on to the next one. You're on. Ooh, there's this dude that I'd never even heard of his name. We're going to get to him coming up. And right now, everybody's just like gaga. It's like, oh, wait, get this guy out of UAB. What? Guy out of UAB? I find it fascinating that, so I get the high school recruiting, you got to put the rankings on. But I don't watch as much college basketball as anyone. Because I mostly just watch the Big Ten in Michigan. In the tournament, I'm watching all that. But I'm not sitting around every day, all day watching, every game in college basketball. I used to be like that, but not anymore. But even so, Michigan gets a guy that started just a handful of games at Illinois, had 7 points and 7 rebounds, and people were acting like, they just got Chris Webber. Like, wow, this guy's awesome. And hey, that's part of the excitement. I get that thing. So, overall, the portal gives, the portal takes away. It's not great for college basketball overall, but if you are able to shift your loyalty fast, Trey Donaldson, hey, we loved you. See ya. I'm all about the next guy coming in from Carolina. Just, move on. You got to have a short memory if you're a college basketball fan and just wait. You sit back and say, okay, you liked last year, brought you some enjoyment. All the guys that were there, you might get a couple guys that but mostly it's going to be a brand spanking new venture, and it's time to get attached to different players. Have a short memory when it comes down to that. So that's how I look at that. I will take your feedback. It's always good to see Richard. He calls himself an average fan and says he used to care. If I had my degree at U of M, Scott is saying that he likes the 2 portal recruits we have brought in. That's good. I do too, Scott. I'm going to get to those coming up. Scott saying we needed a good point guard and power forward, and we have addressed both of those needs. There is no doubt about that. They needed a point guard, especially with Donaldson going, and with Area 51 no longer going to be in Ann Arbor. They needed a big man, and they got that. So I'm going to agree with you on that. Don says, why even apply for admission to the university or attend classes? Just skip all of that and play ball. Pretty close to that now. And when it happens, I'm out. Yeah, I think that's pretty extreme. Let's just skip, make them employees. Just don't let them go to school. That's a slippery slope argument. I get it. That's the way you could say that it's headed, and you could be correct about that, and then you'd say that you were out. I remember, Don, and this, you'll have to be a little bit older to, I don't know if it's appreciate it or believe this, but academics and being a student athlete and valuing the school part used to be a big deal. And yeah, you could say, oh, it's a lot of lip service. And there was that, but it was talked about a lot. I can remember when Lloyd Carr was coach and they wanted to move the Ohio State game to the Thanksgiving weekend or after. Carr, the first thing that he said is, I want my guys, to be home with their families for Thanksgiving, and the academics. We've got finals. He was talking about the kids, the players needed to time to study, and he wanted them to be with their family on Thanksgiving. Nobody even talks about that anymore. And with the playoff, when you hear it's what is it, 14 teams now, and automatically even before they played the 14, it's like, we want 16. Nobody talks about any kind of academic calendar, only if it applies to the transfer portal and, why are guys in there, and, there's different calendars at different schools, which makes everybody a little crazy when it comes down to trying to find a uniform date for the transfer portal. But because of the money and the players get the money now too, nobody sits around saying, well, what about the kids being able to study for finals? And I get it, when the NCAA tournament is, involved with, you can, when are you going to class? When are you taking any kind of a schoolwork that way? It's always been that way, but nobody mentions it at all. And it used to be, at least there was lip service for it. I don't know, maybe that's all it was, but that part is out the window. Nobody even, mentions that part anymore. It's almost like when the guys are coming in, they used to say, I really like the, business school or something. Like, nobody's even talking about that anymore. It's just like, if I can get 50,000 more, maybe I'll jump to St. John's. I don't know. I think there's one thing that, if you're a Michigan fan, that is pretty good when it comes down to the portal, is that you've got, again, Dusty May had 6 portal players last year, 3 freshmen, so 9 new players. Heck, Namari Burnett was a transfer player. Last year, besides the freshman, Cheddar was the only player that Michigan had on their roster that came in that wasn't a transfer. Now, there's a heck of a lot going on in football, and I especially at the running backs position, and there's big-time stars. I saw a bunch of 4 stars, almost too many to mention, and I saw it on the Maize and Blue review on the Den. Josh Henschke is back from down under, and even though he thinks it's like today's Wednesday, I think he thinks it's Thursday at like 9 o'clock. His clock's all screwed up. He's on it, man. He's talking 4-star tight ends. He's putting guarantees in about guys that are going to come in, and a future cast. That's what they're called. I call them guarantees. Actually, I call them forecasts when I'm doing them. We got a few future cast in there. We got some interesting development at the running back position. All of that's going on. I'm saying all of that to tell you that if you want to know all of that news and what's going on, plus as things unfold in the transfer portal, it's all there nice and neat. Plus Michigan fans responding to it all day and all night. That's what the Maize and Blue review is all about. Head over there, go to michigan.rivals.com. You can get instant access. All right, so we take the turn and now look at the transferred portal. Michigan, as I'm counting it up, they got 7 spots open with Donaldson, the Wolf of State Street, Jace, Pippin, Vlad, Ruben, and Sam Walters. Those guys are all gone, although it's not official with Danny Wolf, but I'm expecting that it will be. Michigan does have 3 incoming freshmen, including Trey McKinney, Mr. Basketball from last year, who is going to be I'm expecting him to be Mr. Everything. I'm expecting him to be Michigan's leading scorer. He's going to be one of their top ball handlers. A star. And I think he's going to need to be if Michigan wants to be where they were last year. But that's my initial thought on Trey McKinney. No pressure on him. He's coming in. But so 4 slots I have open, and then they have just added 2 players. Transfer point guard out of North Carolina, Elliot Cadeau. And then they have Morez. That's not spelled right on the screen. I'm sorry. Morez Johnson Jr., a power forward from Illinois. And we're going to go over both of those players in Cadeau and Morez, and I'll give you my thoughts. I've looked a little bit at their numbers. I've looked a little bit at their tape. I have come up with a comparison, and here you go for that. So Cadeau, I think you have a hard time, although there's someone that's making a case for it, and if you're a Michigan fan, you'll probably make a case for it in your mind, that Cadeau is a better player than Donaldson. The numbers don't back that up, and really the eye test doesn't back that up either. And so we'll have to wait and see on that. My read on the point guard position at Michigan is that Donaldson wanted more money, and Michigan wasn't ready to come there. So Michigan went out and looked for a replacement for Donaldson, and they got a pretty good replacement for him. And maybe he will be, when all said and done, a better player. But I don't see, it's not an obvious upgrade. You may differ, and that's fine. That's what it's all about. And if you're a Michigan fan, I can see that you might be like, this is an upgrade. It's Michigan. See you, Trey. But so for all the things that you say about Trey Donaldson, I came back and felt about the same things with Cadeau. And I have to be honest, Carolina shouldn't have been in the tournament this year. They got in because their athletic director had a bonus, and he was on the selection committee. And it was one of the worst picks ever. And that's just not me saying that. Everybody knows that. So they shouldn't have been in the tournament, but they were. But Cadeau, when it came down to their big game against Ole Miss, was bad. 1 of 8 from the floor, and came up with 4 points and 3 turnovers. And, so Trey Donaldson, people say Donaldson was nowhere to be found against Auburn. Like Cadeau, I watched a game or two of Carolina Duke, one of the great rivalries in college basketball. Cadeau didn't stand out. He put up good numbers in one of the 3 games against Duke this year, but the other games, he was pretty bad. You look at his numbers. And the ACC, you get a long list of, wow, there's that team, and they didn't really have any of those kind of games because the ACC, besides against Duke, was down. Now, he put up pretty good numbers against Michigan State. And who else did that? He didn't put up very good numbers. It was a mixed bag. He played against Auburn and Michigan State, and his numbers were pretty good. You can say, hey, that's nice. And it is. That's a check mark on the side of saying, hey, that was good, that he had good numbers against Auburn, who's in the Final Four, Michigan State, Michigan's big rival. But then he played terrible against Alabama. Didn't have the numbers there. So very mixed bag when you look at Cadeau, a little bit like Donaldson. And that's why I compared him to Donaldson. They both, wear that number 3, and they have similar type games. That would be my comp, Cadeau versus Donaldson. And they're pretty comparable. Now, if you're just looking at the stats, Donaldson's going to win. Donaldson played more minutes than Cadeau, and he shot better from the free throw line. He shot better from distance, and he didn't have as many turnovers. In fact, Cadeau was a complete turnover machine. He was one of the worst ball handlers in all of college basketball. You can go and look that up. He gets an F when it comes down to turnovers, but it's not all bad. He's 6'1". He's a tremendous athlete. So you can see why he was a 5-star coming out. He's very explosive at 6'1". He'll get a steal. If you look at his highlight reel, he'll get a steal and he'll go down and he's punching it down. And it's not just where he's all alone and coming down and dunking. He's got guys trailing and coming at him and going to block him, and he throws it down. There was another one where he gets ripped, and then he chases down the player in the front court, and he slams one and bats it off the glass. He's pretty quick, and he's pretty explosive, and I like that part about his game. And that's the two things that, besides his number one, what you say superpower, would be that he is a really sharp passer. What I will be interested in, because I just watched highlights of him, and all of the highlights where he's passing, he's very good passing, deliberate, knowing where to put the ball, delivering it to his teammate through a pick and roll. Excellent that way. You can see his strength when he has the ball, looking up, being able to forward the ball and advance it down the floor. You can see him where he is on a fast break and he is ahead. Sometimes of the one highlight, he's rewarding his big man that is behind him. You love to see that in a point guard. So all of that kind of stuff is very good for Cadeau and the explosiveness, and he's a super sharp passer. The part I'll be interested in is when you watch him is I don't see any fancy, mustard type passes, like behind the back kind of stuff. I don't see any razzle dazzle, and that's fine. I like a little flair with guys that play basketball. I'm not just all like, you got to be fundamentally sound, which is nice, but I like a little flair. But in all of his highlights, he's just delivering the ball, bounce pass, up ahead, and the rate that he turns it over, which is the worst in all of college basketball. I'm wondering if I watch a game, if I am going to see some like behind the back, or he's throwing it up into the stands, or, he's just dribbling it off his foot or whatever else. Because when you're watching his highlight reel, boy, he's laser, and there's nothing, there's no like the behind the back kind of stuff. It's nice when you see that. So I'll be interested to see when it comes down to the turnovers. With that, I'll see if anybody had anything to say about Cadeau. He's just come in, so it's kind of hard to, if you didn't sit down and watch any tape of him, or if you're just, watching or taking in from like some Michigan fans that are doing some things, probably you're not going to get any critique other than, this guy's a dynamite passer, which he is, and that's good. Yeah, he'll need to do better with his turnovers. So he gets an F in that department. Don says, in other words, with the turnovers at Michigan next year will be a total crapshoot. The fans cannot count on any consistency. Yeah, I have to admit this, Don. This year, when I talk about Michigan basketball, if we say, well, what happened back in the 24-25 season? Dusty May's first year. Hey, went to the Sweet 16. They had Area 51, everything else. But, man, that team turned the ball over way too much. Couldn't take care of it. And we always thought it was going to end up, and it was going to cost them somewhere down the line. And a lot of it, they ended up winning ugly because of it. So they bring in a guy who turns the ball over more than the point guard that's on his way out. And so you've got a little bit of just this memory of that's one of the big issues with Michigan, and they're bringing a guy in who turns it over even more than the guy last year. So it's a sore spot. But you get a different team, you get different coaching, and you can improve. Now, if he was he's going to be a junior. He played 2 years at Carolina. If he had just played one, you could say, hey, he was just a freshman. You make your biggest jump from freshman to sophomore season, and he really did when it came down to three-point shooting. Cadeau's not a very good free throw shooter, below average free throw shooter, and he's a below average three-point shooter as well. But that's the thing. I think, but you can say that about any player who goes anywhere. Hey, it's a different scenery. Maybe this coaching staff will have a better effect on him in the development. And I'm not over here telling you that I am down on Cadeau. I'm just telling you what I saw. The facts are the facts when it comes down to the numbers. And I'm just saying he's not an obvious upgrade over Trey Donaldson. So anyone that's out there, and I don't care if it would be I don't know, whoever you like, Jay Billis or whoever would call it and break down these guys' games. If they were saying that Cadeau was an obvious upgrade over Trey Donaldson, I would say, well, I don't think you watched every game of Trey Donaldson and every game of Cadeau. And I think you're just, I don't know how. I don't really think you can make that case. Although there is somebody that is making the case coming up here straight ahead. So we'll just see where they are at. Richard saying development is still crucial. Yeah, for sure. Scott is out of hand just saying he is an upgrade over Donaldson. Give me an idea of why you would say that, because he's a pass first point guard. I think that would be probably the argument that you'd want to go to. A very good passer. That's the thing that stands out. Really, it's the only thing that stands out over when you look at the numbers. The quickness and the athletic ability, to me, if you've watched the tape, that also jumps out. So you could go there with that. Here's somebody on the internet that I follow that I like. His name is Evan Maya Kama, I think his name is. I followed him for a while. He's a college basketball guru, and he loves Cadeau. He thinks it's a great pickup for the Wolverines. I'm going to read what he had to say. He says, Cadeau's one of the more polarizing players in the portal. There's no denying that Cadeau is an elite playmaker and distributor. He finished the season in the top 15 in predicted assist rate and the 99th percentile nationally, earning an A+ grade in assists and playmaking score at evanmaya.com. As a scorer, he's pretty average in every department, but he's a decent rebounder for a point guard and has solid defensive grades. Given his 5-star status coming out of high school, there's still some untapped potential here that a new coach could unlock, which is why he's a top 5 transfer in the portal. And he has his transfer portal rankings, and Evan Maya, who I like, has Cadeau ranked above Trey Donaldson. In fact, Cadeau ends up ranking as the 6th best player in Maya's transfer portal rankings, for whatever that's worth, and Donaldson is 9th. So they're both top 10. It's pretty close. When you're getting this, you're splitting hairs. There's, I don't know, probably another half dozen so people that rank the players. I didn't go through all of those. It'd be interesting to see how they had Donaldson and Cadeau ranked. I would say it could be pretty close. I'm saying that I don't see that it's an obvious upgrade. But what I would say, and just with rankings, if we're just talking about rankings, that's not too bad. If you're getting, you lose a top 10 guy, but you're getting a top 10 guy. Not too bad. Now, up on the screen, I have the rankings. The point guard for Maryland, Gillespie, is number 1. Dent, who played against Michigan State, you may have watched him from New Mexico, big-time scorer down there for New Mexico. And Richard Pitino, he's going to UCLA, so you'll see him in the Big Ten. What I thought was interesting is the 3rd-ranked player in Evan Maya's rankings of the transfer portal. He has the player that Michigan picked up, Morez Johnson Jr., as the 3rd best player out there to land at any position. And Morez Johnson Jr., he's 6'9", but the first thing, I'll put on some of the tape and we'll watch just a couple minutes and talk about him. What immediately jumps out is that with his wingspan, he can guard 7-footers. It wouldn't surprise me if they said he has a 6'3", or a 7'3" wingspan. There's even a small thumbnail picture of him here, and you can just see he's got super long arms, and he had 8 starts for Illinois last year, and he averaged 7 and 7. So that doesn't jump out. Not a very good free throw shooter, and he doesn't shoot threes at all. But what he does do is he rebounds, and if you're got a point guard that can find a big man down low, especially via the lob, he is a dunk machine. I saw a lot of people on the Maize and Blue review on the Den. Their instant comparison for Johnson was beef stew. Isaiah Stewart for the Pistons. And while I get that, and you hope that defensively, because Isaiah Stewart wants to go after every drive, and I love that about him. He will not let the opponent dunk on the Detroit Pistons. He is challenging you, and he is a tough defender. So I like that standpoint. Isaiah Stewart shoots a lot of threes, though, and to me has a different body style. Jalen Duren, actually, for the Pistons would be more of a comparison to me for Morez Johnson, and that if you watch the Pistons play, and it's something that maybe Dusty is looking at now, it's big in the pros, and it's big in college basketball. If you got a point guard that can drive, you play this two-man game where you get everybody on the outside and you let your point guard deal and he gets into the lane, and then you have a player like Jalen Duren, and Cade Cunningham is either scoring himself or he's just throwing up a lob and he's dunking it. And you see it at least a half dozen times a game if you watch the Pistons play. And that's what Johnson's game is. Johnson, you could just throw him an alley-oop and he's throwing it down. And it's so much. He doesn't have, not many guys do. Duren's 21 years old and he's just ripped to shreds. But I would say that Johnson is on his way to having that kind of build. And if I had to compare Morez Johnson Jr. to a former Wolverine, I would go to a player that I've already mentioned in this podcast, Moussa Diabate, who was the 5-star who left after his freshman season and he got drafted by the Clippers. He's playing with the Hornets now. Got a new deal this year. So that's what I thought of watching Johnson. Now keep all that in mind, especially the lob and dunk. Because I've got let's see, I guess I have to remove this one first. I'll put this tape on of Morez and look at the length. You'll be able to see it here. Oh, I got some music accompanying it. Well, it's not moving yet. Look out. Well, if we're not going to get a fluid feed, it's not going to be very good. What's happening in this house? Give you a little play-by-play. Every 5 skill shot. Yep. It's not working. What are you going to do? If you do watch him, just keep in mind the comparison to Duren or Diabate. That's what I would say. That's it. Let's look at some of the feedback on Good Afternoon, Michigan Football and Basketball. Always appreciate any kind of feedback that you're giving. You're here live during the show. We take a look and see what you have to say. Scott says that Cadeau is a true point guard, and he was the number 8 Rivals player in his senior year, and he's a better athlete. I would agree with all those. I mean, like, there's no disputing whether he was, it was a 5-star, and I would agree that he's a better athlete. And the part about being a true point guard, he is a pass-first player, and you could say Donaldson didn't have that particular. I wouldn't call Donaldson a pass-first point guard, and Scott says he has a higher ceiling, and I can buy that. Again, I don't think it's an obvious upgrade, but there you are. Don jumping in and saying they're asking a question: were most of Michigan's turnovers due to passing errors, or losing the ball off the dribble, or losing the handle on a rebound? I would say it was a mixed bag, Don, but my explanation for Michigan's turnovers, we talked about it all year long, is that Michigan just didn't have the players that were equipped taking care of the ball and passing. Trey Donaldson put all of that on his shoulders. He was their best ball handler. He was their best passer. He had to facilitate the offense, and he didn't have any help. If you consider the help that he had when he was out there of moving the ball around, he had Roddy Gale, who's got to be one of the worst players in all of college basketball in decision-making and passing. Straight line drive is, that was good, but he really struggled in that department. So they weren't getting any help from Gale, who broke everything up there and had to have the offense disjointed at times with the other players on the team not even wanting, I would think at times, to pass him the ball. It was that bad for Gale, if we're just going to be honest about that. Also, Namari Burnett, who was a tremendous wing three-point shooter and corner three-point shooter, and is a pretty decent athlete. But when it comes to passing the ball or dribbling the ball, he is well below average. He would be in the worst percentile that you can have. So there's the guys that are surrounding him, and Vlad Golden wasn't dribbling the ball. So now you're getting to the point, well, who else are we even talking about? You're talking about Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf had more turnovers than Cadeau, who's gets an F in that department. And Wolf is pretty good for a 7-footer, but he also turned it over at an extraordinary rate. And that was the reason. They just didn't have guys that could handle the ball and could pass the ball. They were good in other departments, but that was the department that they were not good in. Besides Donaldson, who, wasn't really great either at those things. And so, that's why they were bad. That's why they were the worst turnover team in all of the Big Ten. Blank Name says it's weird that Donaldson put himself in the portal. He must have been threatened by that 5-star. Well, he was either threatened by the 5-star or his agent told him that he could get more money somewhere else. And I would think it would be the latter. Without knowing the situation here, and we have to guess. It's Dusty. Dusty's got to keep his cards close to the vest. But the trick for a team to be able to win a championship in the future is going to be able to get a team assembled like Auburn, where you get not one experienced guard, not two experienced guard, not three experienced guard, but they got 4 or 5 good. Pettyjohn, is that the freshman southpaw who's probably going to go in the draft this year? He's a freshman, comes off the bench, killed Michigan, had 20 points. I mean, that guy's a star. The other 3 that were playing seniors across the board, and they really put together a dynamite backcourt, and they came at you in waves, and that's one of the big reasons, along with Broom down front, that they were on the front line, were able to get to the Final Four. So was there a conversation that, Donaldson played over 30 minutes, Cadeau started every game and played close to 30 minutes. Was there a conversation of, hey, we're going to bring this guy in, you guys can share the duties? Won't this be great for Michigan? Maybe. Or when you have an agent, and this is the dynamic, there's going to be a lot of people that are talking about, I know what's going on the inside. Who knows with agents? Your agent could be every day. And you could say this is what a good agent should do. He should be calling every general manager of every team out there. And if Trey Donaldson was going to get $500,000 from Michigan this year, every school you're shopping yourself to, you're saying, look, we'll come for $750 or whatever the number is, or whatever you're doing. We'll come for $6. We'll come for $7. We'll come for $1 million. I say all these numbers, and there was a little bit of a read. Tom Crean, he's the former Michigan State assistant. He coached at Georgia. Was he at Indiana for a minute? And then I believe he is Jim Harbaugh's brother-in-law, right? Tom Crean. Most people know who he is. He said that, and it was the second hand, there was a podcast talking about it, and then I went to Crean's page, and he's talking a ton about the transfer portal. He didn't specifically say this, but these guys, I don't know, were listening to him, and they said that Crean was saying that the top players right now in the transfer portal, they're going for $1.5 million. You're a big man or you're a point guard, you're getting $1.5 million. Well, Cadeau and Donaldson, by just the ranking that I'm looking at, and they're coming off the board pretty fast, they might be getting seven figures. I know this, this sounds crazy to people, and it sounds weird for me talking about. But maybe Donaldson was saying that he needed $1 million, and maybe Michigan was saying 750. And you could say, if Michigan was saying 750, and St. John's was saying we'll give you, 800,000. That's not a big deal, but maybe you wouldn't jump then. But if you're talking about 250,000, that nice round number for $1 million sounds a lot better than 750. I don't know, but my guess is there was money. And that's why all these guys are in the transfer portal. They all have agents. They all know what they got paid, and they all know what their number is going to be from the school that they're at. And then there's 300 other schools out there that all have varying levels of money and everything else. But there's got to be, if you're talking about big money, 150, certainly 25, 30 schools that are saying, we can beat that number. And so then you have a decision to make. All things being equal, I would rather have Donaldson coming back. He's somebody you liked. I wouldn't make that trade. I know that that's not something that it's done now. The way things work, you're like, oh, absolutely not. Because I get that. I understand how things work that way. But I think that's what's going on when it comes down. Scott really likes Johnson Jr. When was the last time Michigan had a real banger at power forward? I don't know. Diabate? Is that he was just a freshman? You got to go a little bit further back than that. Hadley changed his picture. You want to see what he looks like there. Do you know how Scar and Jerry are doing in their brackets if they did one? And how is yours doing? I don't know if those guys filled out brackets or not. To tell you the truth, I did 2 brackets, like those $1 million. It's weird because I'm not the biggest. I love the tournament and everything. I'm not the biggest bracket guy. I fill them out here and there, but I didn't take the bracket out and work it through. But in one of the brackets, I had Duke winning, and the other one I had Houston. So those 2 are alive. But talking about brackets, Hadley, I have to mention number 1 seed Steve, who I've known for over 30 years. And it used to frustrate me because back when I did, the funny part is when I was in my 20s, filling out the brackets, there was nothing better. It was one of the rites of passage. It was one of my favorite things to do in all of sports. Go to Michigan football games, fill out a bracket. I mean, there's nothing like it. So I'd fill out my bracket, and then old Steve would always just take the number 1 seeds. And I would say, Steve, that is so weak. It's never happened. You're doing nothing. We'd call him Chalk Steve. And his answer is I get what you guys are saying, but I've won more times than not money by just going with the 1 seeds. And he said also that he always just goes with the 1 seeds and eliminates really any of his thinking about really having to, spend a lot of time doing it. He just puts all the 1 seeds in there and then just says, hey, I'm going to pick one of the 4 seeds to win it. But he kept saying that he has won repeatedly by using this method of just advancing all of the 1 seeds. And then, 15 years ago, whatever, all the 1 seeds made it. I was thinking, oh, old 1 seed Steve. But here he is again. Somewhere, old 1 seed Steve is just sitting back and saying, you know what? You guys all try to, pull these and pick these upsets. And for 40 years, I've just picking the 1 seeds, and I've made more money than anybody else out there filling out these pools. And you guys all call me, Chalk Steve, 1 seed Steve. You guys do nothing but bash me, and I'm doing nothing but counting money. So I got to give it up, Hadley, to old 1 seed Steve. And you know what, Hadley? 1 seed Steve works at that radio station that you listen to. So you shouldn't have to think too hard about who I'm talking about there. Call out. See if 1 seed Steve is still picking that way. We've got Richard during the show changing his avatar. Now that's what I like. He's talking about football. Okay. Twist my arm. I'll get to football. Let's see if my video is going to play now. Slow motion. Oh, it's a little bit better now. Look at the big man. Oh, here he is, Mr. Morez Johnson. Look at catch, one power dribble, slam. What you can see is the wingspan. Hanging out down low. You can see a lot there. Here he is on the pick and roll, one power dribble. That's the longest shot that he'll make in this series of highlight reel. Here he is again, going to the basket. Layup. See the wingspan with him pointing out his teammate. Works to a double team. Powerhouse moves. Able to lay it in. Here he is underneath. And one. And one. Here's the lob. Catches it, doesn't even dunk it there. That's the lob. Oh, look, here's another lob. Oh, no, block shot. Get it out of here. Here he is playing some defense. Get a block there. Hey, he's listed at 6'9". If I didn't know he was 6'9", I would say 6'10", but then I would say he's a 7-footer with his wingspan. Yeah, wingspan again. Human eraser on the back line. This is defense. There's that defense again. Get it out of here. And he's like Bill Russell. Notice when he's blocking these shots, he's keeping them down. Well, threw that one around. Pat this one around. Ooh, got fouled. Underneath. Tenacious rebounder is what you can see there. Hopefully he improves his free throw shooting. 61% is a freshman. But you see that a lot of times. Get him up by 70%. You'd really like that. Oh, here he is following it up. Got the Illini crowd jacked up. One more. Gather. Turn. Oh. And with authority. There's a reason I take that music out. Because it's pretty loud when I'm doing it. There it is. Let's go to football. Oh, wait, I've got one more thing. And that is this guy. Yaxel Lendeborg. I hadn't heard of him until the last couple days. But people that are all a buzz about the transfer portal and are about who's out there and who's the best to get, a lot of people are saying this is the number one guy to get. Yaxel is the one. Could be going to the draft. A lot of people saying he's going to Kentucky, but he's at least, I would think Michigan would be in his top 6. So he's just somebody to keep an eye on. I'm not thinking that Michigan's going to land Yaxel. I think he would have to have a special pod if he did. You're talking about, I don't know. I was going to say something like, they're the favorite in the Big Ten, but it would feel like something like that. You land there's just because of the buzz about this guy. If Michigan would get Lendeborg, I think it would be time to party. Now, I was saying all that about football. I thought I had one screen up there. I do. Oh, yeah, here's Lendeborg. He's in the top 5 in Evan Maya's ranking of the portal players. So keep an eye on him. Again, Kentucky is in there, but it's at least one. He's being talked about so much. He's the not only just the flavor, he is the moment right now. It's all about Yaxel. Until he goes somewhere, you're just drawn to him like, bees and honey right now. As a recruiting fan, I mean, he is the one. You've got your eyes on Yaxel. So whatever you do as a recruiting fan, just think Yaxel. And until it ends up not happening. Here's my thoughts on football. So here's the quarterback position currently and what's going on the second day of April. Davis Warren hurt his knee on December 31st in the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa. Those surgeries for recovery normally are 8 to 9 months. Michigan plays on the last day of August with their opener, which would, be a day short of 9 months. Now, as we've seen with ACL, sometimes, you get you go about a month earlier and then some a month later. So it's not, the average is 9, but 8 to 10 months. So you've got a guy who is not going to be able to do anything in spring. I don't know how much he's going to be able to do in the summer phase or even in fall camp. But then you get him cleared at some point during the season. How much is he going to be able to ramp up? It reminds me of the Jack Tuttle situation for last year. They're like, oh, Tuttle will be okay. Tuttle wasn't in the spring. Tuttle wasn't in the fall. Tuttle then, when things went south, they're like, we're going to get him up on the horse next thing you know, because they were desperate and they started him. And then he looked like a guy who hadn't played a lot of competitive football because of his injury, played decently for a quarter or whatever it was against Washington, but then looked like a guy that hadn't played football. I'm going to put Davis Warren in the category of Jack Tuttle 2.0. Who knows? That say scare. That would concern me if I was on the Michigan football staff with Davis Warren in terms of counting on him. If he's just, you're thinking, hey, he's, who knows, good guy to have in the room, like a quarterback coach. We love him. Hell, he beat Ohio State. He's going to be great for the room, knows a lot, but, counting on him, I would be concerned. Mikey Keene is not practicing. The spring game, we are now into April. And the guy that most people would have expected to start for Michigan this year is not participating in spring football. That would concern me. Now, I don't know why he's not practicing. I believe it's an injury, but I don't know what the nature of the injury is. So it's hard for me to say how concerned I would be unless I knew what that injury is or is because he's not practicing. It's present. Sore, whatever. You can speculate on a million things. But if I'm on the outside, like I am, looking in, and all of you are, I would be, is terrified the right word? Yeah. What's a little bit down from terrified? I'm nervous. I'm nervous that Davis Warren isn't, available. Mikey Keene isn't practicing. So now I'm down to 2 quarterbacks. And one is Jaden Davis. And look, Jaden Davis, I'll put in the wild card category. As someone who follows recruiting, Jaden Davis was the apple of everyone's eye for about 6 months. It was like, oh, Jaden Davis this, Jaden Davis that. I'm interviewing and, the lead columnist down from the Charlotte Observer, talking about him and where, this was the quarterback of the future, Jaden Davis. Well, then he took he got dinged in the overall rankings at the end because of his size and his throwing motion and his, I think, lack of athleticism. Those are the kind of measurables when people are throwing and you're watching him at camp that people are, he wasn't wowing folks in his shorts. He wasn't throwing the ball the length of the field. And so his rankings dropped. And that's why. And it's understandable to a point. A lot of other people are like, Michigan likes him. I'm going to like him. People that are downgrading him don't know what they're talking about. Well, then there were a few reports. I had one myself. I talked with somebody at practice and, hey, he doesn't look like he belongs. Now, he's just a freshman when that was being, relayed to me. Just a freshman. And, he's still shooting the ball from the side. And so it's just scared a lot of people. You get better from freshman to sophomore year. who knows? Very high interest. Everybody's very interested, but he's a wild card right now to know if he is a hot prospect that could potentially be the quarterback for Michigan next year, or if he's just in over his head. I mean, it's a huge discrepancy where you're thinking about it, and we don't know. There have been, he's doing okay, in the spring practice, but it wasn't like, oh, Davis is throwing darts, and he just really is taking a huge jump from last year. I hadn't heard that. So he's a wild card. And then we go to Underwood. He's Superman. I think Bryce Underwood is Superman. Bryce Underwood is the, $10 million man or whatever he is, but he is only 17 years old. I would like, when I first came out, Jerry Dirio, who was mentioned on here, said, I think that Underwood will start week 5. Michigan plays New Mexico, then they got to go to Oklahoma, then they play Central, and then their first Big Ten games on the road against Nebraska. Then they have a bye week, and it's against Wisconsin. So in the summer, I was like, yep, that's what I think. But then right around the time, about a month ago, where Underwood did that interview with Rich Eisen, it was like, we got Ohio State covered, and I'm going to win a couple of Heismans. I mean, that along with just more letting him out there to do that, I thought, and then looking at the schedule and thinking about playing 2 quarterbacks and how you're really going to do that with Oklahoma, I just figured, no, Underwood's going to start from day one. Now, I didn't know that Keene was down and not practicing when I made that proclamation. But I have been on I think Underwood starting from Jump Street for a while, wherever since that interview. It was the combination of that interview and looking at the schedule. If you go back and listen to the pods, I kind of worked through that with my own mind. And so I still think that's going to be, but I would like Underwood to earn it in that he's being pushed by a quarterback with a lot of game reps and Keene, that he's also, well, that would have been the one. It's the Keene injury, which has me a little bit, I don't want to, I guess it's coming off as being down on Michigan, but I do think people ask me all the time, what do I think about this upcoming year? And routinely in the summer, I was saying, I think Michigan's a college football playoff team. I think they're going to go 10-2. They've got an easy schedule, and that should be the expectation. I now think starting April here, and it can always change. I don't change it every week or even every month. But I'm downgrading Michigan right now to 9-3. I think having a 17-year-old, just turned 18-year-old quarterback who's not being pushed, and you're playing him, maybe he would be, regardless of who was there, be the starter. But also it just makes me uneasy that it's almost by necessity that they're going to have to play him from game one. And so I don't like that part. That's my reasoning. That's the part that I don't like. They still have a relatively easy schedule when you look at it, at least heading into the season, when you look at how the other teams in the Big Ten are supposed to be. And the hard part about picking them 9-3 is what I'm saying is 10-2, you're going to make the college football playoff. 9-3, you're not going to make the college football playoff. So I went from, I think Michigan's going to make the college football playoff, to now I don't expect them to, with the super freshmen starting from game one. Probably trip up here or there. Also was looking at some of, of the other true freshmen that have started right out of the gate, like Raiola from last year. Not special. I don't even know if he was okay. I mean, he was up and down, but nothing where you're like, wow, man, this guy is he's the goods. He's awesome. No. In fact, even though he was a 5-star, it was more like he had a lot of growing pains. And so the combination of all that, that's where I sit. Now, things could change. I could be back up and looking very optimistic about the college football playoff and 10-2 and all that, but that's not a huge change, although dropping one game down does still would put them on the outside looking in on the college football playoff, and that would be 2 years in a row, and that would be disappointing for sure. But that's just how I feel about it right now. Let me take some of the feedback before we leave. Richard sees Michigan with a new resolve this season. That would be good. Rico will take 9-3. It's one of the Vegas, I don't know who it was, they came out with an 8.5, so that does have them over. So, you're way down on Michigan. I got them over the number in Vegas. Thanks, CR. Scott throwing up Diabate's freshman numbers. Yeah, well, what would Diabate have been if he would have come back? Now, so Johnson Jr. that they just got from Illinois was 7-7. So, a little bit better numbers. What would Diabate have been? Diabate was a 5-star, Johnson Jr. a 4-star. Scott is talking about going to Michigan football games is on the top of my list. Yeah, that has been number one for me my entire life. It's been Michigan football. It's been number one. Warren should pursue his studies. Yeah, I agree with that. Here's Rashad saying Michigan's turnovers were due to a 7-footer handling the ball too much. Yes, he can handle better than the average, but your point guard should run the offense. Yeah, the point guard needs some help too. So it's interesting time right now. Got guys coming in, going out. And again, lots going on the football side in recruiting. Looks like there's going to be a commitment soon. There's another half dozen players that you look at and you're saying, I could see this happening for Michigan. There's some clarity coming out with the running back position. It's Michigan, Notre Dame. Is there a package deal? Is Hyder, all of that kind of stuff that's going on. So I encourage you to go over to the Maize and Blue review. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you over there. Michigan.rivals.com. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Stay dry and safe if you're in Michigan. I guess anywhere, but threatening weather here today.